Okay, hello everybody. I wanted to do a quick, kind of quick, we'll see how quick it ends up being, live stream about the recent incidents that have occurred in Minneapolis and including but not limited to the murder of Alex Preddy and the murder of Renee Good. These are hard times. Obviously, a lot of us in political kind of spaces have talked a lot about you know, um, the nature of the Trump administration and how it ran on a fascist platform. It's governing in a fascist manner. And, basically just all this kind of stuff. And let's see here. I just got to make sure my stream is connecting. Yeah, it looks good on that one. Okay. Um, and so, yeah, basically just the main thing that I want to talk about today is what can we do about these horrific murders that ICE is committing in our cities. Not that I need to go over this with most of you that'll be watching this, but if you haven't seen the video, you can certainly just Google the killing of Alex Preddy or Renee Good or any of the other ones. I'm not going to show the video here. I've posted about it online a lot and you can definitely find it. A lot of news outlets have it. I think the New York Times has a pretty good track record of breaking these videos down and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, at some level, I don't really feel the need to. I don't really feel the need to go over the fine details because shit. Hold on one second. I don't really feel the need to. Jesus Christ, YouTube, come on, what's the deal here? It already says I'm okay. Um, I think I'm whatever. There's so many fucking little things I have to do to make sure everything's working. I am like the world's like least prepared podcaster that there is. I don't interact with the audience at all, hardly at all. I don't really advertise anything, but I think I provide good content, so that's the main thing. Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, if you really want to see these videos, you can go out there and look. The New York Times has a good breakdown, and I just want to avoid like going frame by frame and like arguing why it's obviously murder. It is murder. I'll just summarize and say that this Alex Preddy one, they literally took his gun from. First of all, ICE attacked him. Secondly, he was helping a woman they had pushed down and asking if she was all right. Then they like pepper spray him in the face. They shove him to the ground. They got like 5 guys on him. They pull his gun out from his pocket, from his whole or belt, and then they shoot him 10 times. And at least I think 3 of them are discharging their weapon. Now, the fucking cowards that did this have been sheltered by the federal government in what I can only describe as a federal cover up of this murder. And we all kind of know that. It's kind of obvious from the context, and that is what it is. But I would just say that we can still have justice here, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about how. Now, let me just start out with some basics. The basics of murder prosecution are fairly simple. All of the states of the country have laws criminalizing murder. Murder is legally defined in most states as the intentional killing of another human being with malice aforethought. And this is a common law. I'm a lawyer. Sorry, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but this is a lawyerly definition. Malice can traditionally be proven in about 4 ways. Intent, if you can prove intent, specific intent to kill, specific intent to do grievous bodily injury resulting in death, and then something called felony murder and something called depraved heart murders. We won't get into those latter 2 categories. It's sufficient. We might get into felony murder a little bit, but it's sufficient to say in this case there was intent by the officer to kill. And so it's clearly going to fit the definition of murder. They intended to kill him. They did something that was likely to lead to his death, and he died. So the only way you could get out from a murder characterization at this point is to A, raise some kind of defense, or B, try to undermine the nature of the intent. Sometimes, there's like accidental and reckless killings that get declassed into manslaughter, and that's a form of homicide that's less serious than murder. And then, of course, you have your defenses such as self-defense or such as, duress or all the mental health kind of defenses. At the end of the day, though, there are this is a case that just as somebody who's seen dozens and hundreds of situations that have been prosecuted as murder, this is clearly an extremely strong case for murder, like unbelievably strong case for murder. Now, as I said, all 50 states have a state law that penalizes murder, but there's also a federal legal system that does something as well. And this is kind of I almost kind of want to actually have an idea. I think what I'm going to do, yeah, let's do this. Okay, so let me, yeah, here we go. We have our good old Paint application here. And I'm just going to just kind of doodle a little bit here what the situation is. So, again, we have the different states, which I will symbolize with these circles. Okay, this is like California and Iowa and Texas and Oklahoma and Tennessee. Okay, these are all the 50 states. But above that, we have the federal government. Okay, and basically, when the country was founded, these were, different entities, different sovereigns, as sometimes we like to say. And so what that means is that um, each individual jurisdiction has a different role to play legally. In the case of state prosecutions, almost all criminal prosecution is done at the state level, right? Like jaywalking and speeding tickets, you wouldn't charge anybody federally with that. But you do also charge the more serious crime of murder at the state level as well. Hold on, I'm thinking my webcam is frozen. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not sure why that was freezing up. Let me just try restarting it there. Okay, I think we're good. So in these different states, 50 states, each state has its own murder law. And then the feds have their kind of system, which is mostly to do with things like money regulation and, terrorism and child porn and things like that. And so because of these differences, the tradition is that the states prosecute murder. But there's one problem with doing that against a federal official, and it's something called the Supremacy Clause. Now, the Supremacy Clause, I'll just pull it up for you, is part of our Constitution, and basically what the Supremacy Clause says is that the Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be okay, so all the laws, including the Constitution and the statutes, are which are under the authority of the United States as a federal entity, I'm just kind of paraphrasing there, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in this Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So basically what the Supremacy Clause is telling us is that even if there's a state legal structure in place, if there's a conflicting federal structure, the federal structure is going to win that debate or that conflict of laws as such. So one could then ask, what if a federal agent is conducting federal activity pursuant to a federal law and a state law prohibits something that they're doing? Well, this comes up all the time, actually. It's usually not in the context of murder. It's usually in the context of like regulation. So if you have, let's say, a federal regulation about, wildfire management or something weird like that, like that you can't, I don't know, leave explosives near the roadside or so. I don't know what it would be. let's say it's a federal crime to leave explosives near the roadside because that impedes the flow of interstate commerce, and the federal government passed a law to make sure that no state would allow that to happen. Well, if the state passes a law that says it's perfectly legal to leave explosives near the roadside, that state law would be unconstitutional because it directly conflicts with the federal law. And this raises a more complicated issue now, because what if the federal law and the state law don't conflict directly? What if they merely are in tension? For example, let's say there's a federal law that says you have to have a minimum of X number of tires on your semi truck per the weight that the truck is. But let's say there's a state that thinks, okay, well, that's kind of dangerous. We need more tires for these trucks going through our state anyway. So they say, okay, well, if the federal standard is you need 10 tires, we're going to make it so you need 12 tires in Illinois or whatever. Well, that creates something called a it's a similar argument to what happened before, where the two laws were in conflict, but in this case, it's a situation where the laws are just in tension; they're not directly contradictory. And what the courts have said is, if Congress has stepped into this area and regulated it somewhat heavily, then state laws that clash with that don't have a really legitimate kind of home state purpose, uh, which we say, well, it doesn't matter. The point is, if those federal laws are operating in this field, it's called field preemption if you really want to look it up, and state laws are in tension with that, the federal laws are going to win that too. The only place where the state kind of has free reign to do what it wants is in fields that are not really regulated. And so what the traditional framework of our federal government has been is that we've had sort of a traditional framework where hold on. I don't know why my camera's giving me so much trouble. I probably need a new webcam. But the traditional thing has been that if there is a sort of local health, safety, morals, and police power issue, then the local government will regulate that. But if there's some kind of economic thing, or it deals with interstate commerce or the military or federal interests, then the feds will regulate that. And so what you typically have is murder, minimum health standards and professional regulation. You can have regulation of uh, traffic and shit like that in cities, but you can't use those to then piggyback into federal regulated areas. It's complicated, and there's a whole doctrine about this called federal preemption. If you want to look it up, just Google federal preemption law, and you can look that up. It has to do with areas where the feds are kind of the source of power rather than the states. But there is a kind of middle ground, or third kind of party, or third category, if you will, that basically is this area I want to talk about, which is that what if there is no federal regulation that prohibits states from prosecuting murder, which there is not. Okay, so states are perfectly allowed to prosecute and have, in fact, prosecuted a lot of murder. That's the traditional role of the states, is to prosecute crime and other things. So if there's no federal law that gets in the way of states prosecuting murder, what's the deal then? What if a federal agent carrying out a federal function, such as immigration, which it traditionally has been defined, what if they commit murder? And see, this is where we find ourselves today, because under state law, the Jonathan Ross who murdered Renee Good, and then the 9 officers who murdered Alex Preddy, are all subject to that state law criminalizing murder. But they are also federal agents that have a federal license sort of to operate and carry out their federal function. And what usually happens is, if there's some kind of incident like this in the past, the feds and the states have worked together, and the feds sort of back off and they say, look, we think our guy was acting rogue and we don't want to defend him, so you guys go ahead and prosecute him and we'll not interfere with that. Unfortunately, in this situation, we have the federal government interfering with the state government and, blocking them from the crime scene, prohibiting them from access to these murderers, not sharing intelligence or other criminal data with the state officials, etc. All of these actions indicate that the federal government is not working with the state government at all on this particular prosecution, and in fact is obstructing that state level, would be prosecution if there was any um, likelihood that that was going to go forward. So at the end of the day, we have kind of a thing that's happening here where there is a state likely, what would be a state prosecution at odds with a federal function, and there are legitimate legal questions about how that gets resolved. But the traditional rule, this hasn't come up a lot, there's not a lot of cases on this, is that the if the federal agent was acting reasonably pursuant to their federal duties, then the state can't interfere with that. But if he steps outside of what would reasonably be considered their legal duties, then the state can and must interfere with that. So, or they can take action to protect their own state interest at that point. It's somewhat complicated, but this is the argument that comes in, and so what I want to talk about now is why hasn't there been prosecution of these people? That is to say, why hasn't there been an arrest? If I were to go outside and murder somebody right now, I would be spending tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, tonight in a jail cell. Okay, I would be immediately detained and prohibited from committing more mayhem in the streets. And yet, in this case, we have the most blatant murder televised in American history almost. I mean, it's just a pretty severe one. And these guys are still free. So what's the deal with that? Two reasons. One, the feds are hiding them. The feds are obstructing them. But two, and here's where I really have some criticism for my own political faction, the sort of left, not even the left is usually pretty good at this. It's just that, unfortunately, the Democratic Party right now is not doing what I think they need to be doing to prosecute these murderers. And that is that they need to arrest these people and initiate the process. I know that there has been statements from people like Tim Walz and J.D. Pritzker and Keith Ellison, these two governors, and then of course the Attorney General of Minnesota. They've all said things like, "We will catalog this evidence for future prosecution." But let me take you back to this screen here. Now, when we're talking about future prosecution, what do they mean? Well, there's really a couple of options. One would be state prosecution, the traditional kind of prosecution that you would expect for murders. Okay, that is one option. The other option is a federal prosecution for some kind of murder charge at the federal level, which would certainly be viable too. Now, the feds simply aren't going to prosecute. So what are certain governors talking about when they say prosecute at the federal level or catalog this for future prosecution? It seems like, based upon the context, that they are referring to the idea that maybe Tim Walz will turn over this evidence to the next Democrat that takes the presidency for federal prosecution. And the reason that I say that's what it seems like they're doing is because they use phrases like, "You think these people are going to be in power forever? We will have justice one day in the future, blah, 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 blah." So they're really kind of positioning this prosecution like it's going to happen in 2029, based upon their words and the context that they're saying it. Now, that's fine-ish. It's conceivable that's possible at the federal level. But let me tell you something. Donald Trump pardoned, hundreds of January 6th insurrectionists previously, right? He pardoned his little band of brown shirts the last time they did something crazy. And he did so knowing full well that some of them were child sex abusers, and some of them were wife beaters, and some of them were violent felons, and some of them were drug dealers, and he pardoned them all anyway. And then several of them have since have gone on to be caught with more CSAM, child SA material. And, he didn't give a shit about pardoning those horrific monsters. So to me, it's very clear. I think it's like 99-1 odds that he pardons every single ICE agent involved in these murders, just preemptively. I wouldn't be surprised if he wakes up tomorrow and does it, honestly. But so at the end of the day, as long as Donald Trump is drawing breath and there's time left, these people are likely to be pardoned. They're certainly not going to be prosecuted right now, and I believe they're likely to be pardoned. And the second he signs that pardon, federal prosecution is done. That's off the table. So what's the other option? Well, it's state prosecution. And so that's why I spent some time talking about the supremacy clause, because if the states were to prosecute these people, they would surely raise two defenses, maybe others, but two defenses for sure. One of them would be this thing called qualified immunity, which we can talk about in a minute. And the other one would be federal supremacy clause defense, which is what I just explained. Again, this is the idea that because they were federal agents carrying out a federal law, that any state law that interferes with that, including being arrested for murder, is an illegitimate intrusion into a higher form of law. Now, again, this has very few historical precedents. I think there's been one or two. Hold on. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up an article about this from Reuters that I read. And I also want to recommend, if you want a good primer on this, go ahead and listen to the Strict Scrutiny podcast as well. They have a pretty good episode that gets into this. But let me see here. I'm going to pull up a article for you. And here we go. So this is Reuters. This is yesterday. And here's what... Okay, so this is something I kind of disagree with. Federal agents are generally immune from state prosecution for... Okay, actually, let me read this fully. For actions taken as part of their official duties. Immunity only applies when an officer's actions were authorized under federal law and were necessary and proper. So I kind of alluded to this earlier. And, okay, and here's the video playing in the background for those who want to see part of that. But basically, what I'm getting at is that these are... I don't know why this fucking camera thing freezes every time I switch, but... so yeah, that's the standard then. So this whole immunity for officers' actions that were authorized under federal law and which are reasonably necessary and proper to carry out that federal function. That is the standard. However, the state, if they raise that defense, then the state has to come back and say, here's why these actions were outside of their official duties or that they were objectively unreasonable or clearly unlawful. Then the judge would make a ruling on immunity, and the case would either be dismissed or the state would go on to prosecute that. And then there's this other thing called qualified immunity, and the qualified immunity basically says that the officers were acting, and there is no clearly established case law interpreting this violation. I'd have to explain what qualified immunity is in a more detailed way. Suffice it to say, they basically would argue that they didn't have a clear barrier to doing what they did under the Constitution, under the established case law stemming from the Constitution, and therefore they're protected because it's sort of like a free bite at the apple. It's sort of like they acted reasonably, and therefore they weren't acting in bad faith, and therefore they should get a little bit of blanket protection. That's the really dumbed down version of qualified immunity. But the more dangerous defense to this prosecution is the federal supremacy clause defense. Now, there have been some precedents for this, and I wish I could bring them up in real time. I should have looked this up earlier, but there have been cases where federal agents have been prosecuted for state law criminal prosecution. So I just don't have those examples right in front of me. You can Google that. You can look it up. I know that there's been a number of times where that's happened, including, I believe, during the Rodney King stuff in LA in the early 90s. Now, one other thing that we should keep in mind in this, I know this is AI, but it's accurate, 28 U.S.C. Section 1442 says that federal official can seek to remove a state criminal prosecution to federal court. So if they don't like the court system in a state, they actually have a really pretty smooth path of taking their state criminal prosecution out of the hands of the state judge and putting it into the hands of a federal judge. And just FYI, the federal courts are way more conservative than a lot of state courts, certainly than Minnesota State Court, because the Republicans have so dominated the judicial appointment process in the last 10, 15 years. So they probably can and will do that. However, even if they do that and they go to federal court, two things. One, they still must face a jury of their peers eventually. And two, state law applies, not federal law. So it's a federal court hearing state law. I know it's complicated. but it's just like a state law trial, a state murder trial. It just goes down the street to the federal building rather than the state courthouse. And the one little tweak that I want to add to that is that the person ruling on immunity may end up being the federal judge rather than the state judge. And the immunity question, bizarrely, is a matter of federal law. So they'll have to make a federal law decision about immunity, only to then transfer over and consider the trial and thus whether a conviction is warranted based upon a jury finding under state law for murder, even if they're in federal court. It's very complicated. But it absolutely is possible, and at the very least, here's what I can absolutely fucking guarantee you. If the state were to file murder charges against these Nazis that murdered Alex Preddy and the Nazi that murdered Renee Good, the state would be well within their right to arrest and detain these fucking murderers. They would be under arrest. They would be placed in jail pending trial, and there would be an issue about whether they're entitled to bond or not. Some murderers are, some aren't, and if they were entitled to bond, it would be pretty damn high. And they would at least have to suffer in prison, or not prison, it would be in jail for some time before they were able to get out or have a bond hearing. And frankly, if I'm the judge looking at this and I see that these people have already fled the state once, I'm not giving them a fucking bond. I would not give these fucking weasels bond. But if I got overruled or if there was some reason to give them bond, it would have to be awfully high because, one, they've already fled the state and have obstructed evidence once, maybe multiple times. But two, they're also we all know what's fucking going to happen is that the right-wing fucking church network on, the extreme right, talk radio and all this shit, they're going to start some GoFundMes and they're going to raise millions of dollars to defend these creeps, and those millions of dollars will be used to bond them out. So when making a bond determination, judges must consider the means of the person to raise money and make it so that the bonding out puts a significant amount of personal wealth of the individual at risk in the bond process. So I know, and at the very least, you have to try. Like, maybe they'll get out eventually, and maybe they'll file their little defense, and maybe the judge will rule for them, and then it gets appealed, and we'll see. Or maybe the judge will rule against them. Then they get convicted of fucking murder. Then they start spending time in prison. And then, 5 years down the line or whatever, the U.S. Supreme Court, which is fascist itself, rules in their favor and lets them out. Fine, I would hate that, but at least they did 5 years in prison. Now, here's the problem with not doing anything and waiting, okay? I know we hear this, like, there is no statute of limitations for murder. We're banking evidence. We're cataloging evidence for future prosecution. Okay, here's the problem with not doing anything right now. Right now, the American people, by massive numbers, actually, do not believe that ICE is acting appropriately, and they want justice. And if they don't get justice through the state, you can only sustain that for so long before vigilantes start taking justice into their own hands. And if you're asking me, like, which is better, a state where 9 murderous Gestapo agents can just execute an ICU nurse in the middle of the street while being filmed and not worry about prosecution, or a society where that happens, but then some random, let's just say, self-actualized vigilante does justice for us because our system is so broken. I prefer that over no justice at all. I mean, let me be very clear. I strongly prefer a system that has a even-handed, fair, logical, consistent, and across-the-board approach to having justice. But if the choice is Gestapo gets to murder people without any consequences, or some random citizen sacrifices their freedom to do justice, I mean, that's a tough call, but I go with it's probably better to have justice somehow than to have no justice at all. Again, I do not condone violence, nor would I recommend anybody do that. But I think that is what is going to happen, is if these people are not prosecuted and held accountable under the state system, some random person is just going to take it into their own hands. And that wouldn't be good for anybody except arguably, the cosmic whatever, the sense of justice in our brains. But it's not good for the society. It really represents a breakdown of the society. We don't want that. Okay, but you can argue that society is already largely broken down, so whatever. So that's kind of how this would go. And let me just play this out a little bit more. Um, if the state does not prosecute, then Donald Trump pardons them. Then what happens? Well, then we lose this focus, we lose this energy. The feds, maybe they destroy the evidence at this point. If we issue the arrest warrant now, which they can, and even if they argue these technicalities and get off from it in a few years, or maybe they get off from it in 6 months, whatever, but at least we have documented, an official state system where these people are subject to liability for murder. And thus, if a federal official starts destroying evidence or refusing access to witnesses or things like that, they can be held accountable in the future under state law too. And even if these arrest warrants go out and these officers flee the state and never come back to Minnesota, well, one day they're going to go to a fucking blue state, and that fucking blue governor is going to have them arrested and extradited. They're going to extradite their fat Nazi ass back to Minnesota, where they will face justice one day. If we do nothing, then all of this evidence is going to be destroyed and it's going to fade out of memory, and there's not going to be as good of a chance for justice. Let's forget about federal justice because Donald Trump is going to pardon these assholes. That is a silly argument in my opinion. The only thing that makes sense is a state prosecution, and the only reason, in my opinion, to delay a state prosecution till 2029 instead of now is the argument that under whatever Democratic Justice Department that comes into power at that time will do less interference against the state prosecution than the current justice system. And that's true. And I could see an argument about that, but I would like people to articulate that argument. And at the very least, maybe what I would try to do, honestly, if you're going to go that route and say, I want to delay my state prosecution until there's a federal government that's not going to like run interference for it and do like justice is a dish best served cold kind of thing, then what I would do is I would take one of those 9 officers, maybe like the guy that was pistol whipping him, or maybe one of the ones that was holding him down while he was being shot, and I would charge him with felony murder, and then like maybe hold back on the other 8, and then go ahead and prosecute that one. See if the federal courts see how they rule, and then if they rule against the prosecution, then maybe you wait until 2029 and then wait until the Justice Department doesn't run interference, and then you prosecute the fuck out of these Nazis. But I think you still got to prosecute at least one of them, because one of the big problems here is that not prosecuting anybody means that they think they can get away with this, and they will continue to do it. And we've seen that after Renee Good's murderer was not prosecuted, after that fat ass Nazi was not held accountable for murdering this mother. They just knew that they could keep doing it, and since then we've seen them arrest kindergartners. We've seen them take elderly men out of their house in underwear into the freezing cold. We've seen them disappear people into jails for 9 or 10 hours at a time and leave them in the freezing cold without a phone call or a car to try to get home. I mean, these fucking Gestapo agents in our streets are running around with impunity, and we have to do something to deter that. And merely saying you might possibly face prosecution one day isn't cutting it. So in my opinion, one of the biggest issues in the current climate for why we're not getting why the administration is not feeling pushback, even though 65% of the country is opposed to what they're doing right now, maybe more, is because there's no Democrat out there saying, we have issued an arrest warrant. You are facing justice in Hennepin County. You are facing justice under the state law in Minnesota under Keith Ellison's Attorney General's office. So my call to action, and I have a lot of friends in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is like a second home to me. I live here in Des Moines, but Minneapolis is very much a second home. Here's a couple things we can be doing. We can be absolutely contacting the Hennepin County attorney and demanding prosecution. Her name is Mary Moriarty. I believe she was in office during the Floyd prosecution. I could be wrong about that, but she was, oh no, I'm sorry, she's recently elected. Who was her predecessor? Michael Freeman. Okay, he was the guy during George Floyd. But at the end of the day, this got transferred to the AG's office. Okay, so going back to Mary Moriarty, So she is, I don't know much about her. She's a former public defender, and that's usually a good sign. Public defenders are like the like most based kind of lefty attorneys out there, and so I really think that she might be motivated here. I mean, the truth is that I'm going to probably advocate a slightly different path than calling her office, but if you're interested, this is absolutely one place we can all start. We can call this number 612-348-5550. Let me just go ahead and put that up. And this is the Hennepin County Attorney. This is the county where this took place, and that number is right there. And then the other one that I think is actually much more likely to result in prosecution is the Minnesota Attorney General. And that is Keith Ellison right here. And he successfully prosecuted the murder of George Floyd. And let me just try to find that office number. You can go to this website, ag.state.mn.us, or you can click on File a Complaint. And certainly I recommend people go ahead and do that. If you're pissed off about this murder, go ahead and get on there and file this complaint about this murderer that's in our midst, and that will pressure them to act. But more importantly than that is going to be the good old-fashioned phone calls. You can use either of these two numbers here, which I will post here. Sorry, this is getting cluttered, I know, but it's important that we do something, and these are good things that everybody out there can do. Yeah, sorry about this. So let me just move that over. And let me move this over because you can't see that. There we go. Okay, so sorry, this is such a crayon scribbling here, but basically these are some things that we can all do to make a difference in this case. So I would strongly recommend anybody watching this that thinks that there needs to be action. I absolutely do. I think that we should be. I actually think it's way more effective right now to be protesting outside of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and the Attorney General's office than it is to protest anything with Republicans. These Nazis have no shame. They are not moving. They are not going to prosecute what they perceive to be their own Gestapo thugs. So we must pressure the people that will do the right thing, which are these two people, the Hennepin County Attorney, Mary Moriarty, and the State Attorney General, Keith Ellison. And you can call, if you're in the Twin Cities, you can call this number here, and if you're outside, call this number down here, the 800 number, and demand that they prosecute. And if I'm in Minneapolis and I'm organizing nonviolent actions up there, I'm going to sit in, or I'm going to do a protest outside the Hennepin County Attorney's office until arrest warrants are issued. And by the way, if I'm the elected county attorney in Hennepin County, or if I'm the state attorney general in Minnesota, I am I do not understand for the life of me why these people haven't had a press conference in which they simply say, we have reviewed the evidence in this case, and the evidence is clear. A murder occurred, and it is our office's intent to fully investigate this murder and bring these murderers to justice. But that starts by making our streets safe, by getting these murderers off the streets, and therefore that is why I'm announcing today that we have issued 9 arrest warrants for the following agents. And if they don't have the agents' names, they need to then do a press conference asking for the public's help to get their fucking names, because there's enough open intelligence people out there that can find out who these fucking assholes are. So if I'm a Democratic activist in Minneapolis right now, I'm not organizing about yelling at ICE and blowing whistles at ICE, even though that is crucial and that that needs to continue. But the more urgent thing to deter ICE from more murders is to be protesting at your county attorney's office and your attorney general's office. So I would be staging actions there, and I don't understand why there's not more pressure, and I don't understand why there's no movement on that. This is the obvious low-hanging fruit. And even if they come up with some legal technicality where they try to get out of these murder charges someday, fine, make them argue that. Make them argue that to court while they rot in a fucking jail cell. Make them branded as murderers who got off on a technicality rather than murderers who weren't even called that and got off because we didn't even try. Okay? And the only argument about waiting until a federal executive branch is in power again, about having a Justice Department that doesn't interfere with the state prosecution, make that argument then publicly. or try one of the officers first and see how it goes and then try the others. Or yeah, come out and say, our goal is to prosecute this murder at such time as there's a Justice Department that won't interfere with it, and therefore we are calling on all Minnesotans to help us gather evidence to prosecute this murder on January 20th, 2029, when a non-corrupt Justice Department takes over. And we would certainly urge the Trump Justice Department to prosecute this murder anyway. I mean, you can make that statement. But what you can't do is you can't just sit on your ass and do nothing, because they're going to keep murdering mothers and ICU VA nurses if we don't do anything. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about today as far as why there hasn't been a prosecution and what we can do to make that happen. There should be prosecution, and it would be better, frankly, if the state did it rather than some vigilante. And I guarantee you that if the state does nothing, some vigilante is going to do something, and it's not going to be as optimal as if the state had done it. Now, I want to turn now a bit of a turn here. Oh, Jesus. Again, don't really understand what's going on with my camera, why it freezes every time I change scenes. I'll have to look that up later. But anyway, and as you can see, I have my cat behind me on my couch there. Lovely. So I wanted to take just a minute now to express my emotions a bit. I don't do this very often, but these have been really hard times. I was sitting at a fundraiser on Saturday when all of these videos were being released about Alex Preddy being murdered. And the very first thing that came out was the feds calling him a domestic terrorist, and then you get the statement from Ilhan Omar, the representative from this area, that says it was an execution, and then you watch the video and you're like, how could anybody say it's anything but an execution? And we have to, I know a lot of people are angry and a lot of people are sad and really fucking upset about this, and rightfully condemning the Gestapo agents running around in the streets with their little dicks and their fucking cosplay that makes them look even fatter than they already are. And those are all valid emotions, and I heartily agree with them, and I've been feeling them too. But I thought in a time like this, it might be interesting and perhaps even, dare I say, entertaining to do what I can do to channel my rage into something useful. And I was watching some YouTube videos about AI taking over music writing and kind of being replacing music writers and all this stuff, and how it's getting good enough that dumb people don't know that it's AI, but it's going to keep getting better and better to the point where even smarter people start to not know that it's AI. And I just want to use this moment to say this is not a time to abandon human being art. Okay? If you're out there using AI music or AI images, or if you it's one thing if you're I don't know, screwing around with a friend at the bar and you're like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if my friend was a giraffe, and then you do an AI giraffe and they put your friend's face on it. That's fine, whatever, you're having a good time. But there's way too many people out there using AI music and AI art to make money or to promote their brand. This is theft, plain and simple. I've had two people, I'm a music writer, I've had two people in the last year approach me, knowing that I write music, asking me to evaluate their music and help them make it better. And then I listen to it and it's like, this isn't your music, this is just something AI. You typed in write a 6-minute techno song with a lot of angry lyrics about the whatever, and then it spits out this thing, and then they're like, okay, now make it this way, okay, now make it that way, okay, now change the lyrics to this. Sometimes you get people that go at least to the step of writing the lyrics. They'll write lyrics like, here's my lyrics, spit out a metal song about it, and it will. And I'm like, this is not music writing. And I don't want to come off as elitist or anything, I'm just a person, but I think that times like this really demonstrate the need to respect and honor human-made art forms. And so I thought maybe today it would be interesting to just do a little bit of music writing live to show you how it's done. I mean, not how it's done as such, but how to maybe process our feelings a little bit, and maybe it would be kind of useful to do it with you all with me. I'm only going to do this for 5 or 10 minutes, but I just want to demonstrate ways that we can all kind of express ourselves in these trying times. So let's go ahead and switch over to our software. Okay, back. And let's go with a piano vocal. And, this is what I want to do. Actually, let me change this up a bit. I use a program called Noteflight. People use different programs. It's fine. I'm going to go ahead and do chorus. Actually, I'm going to go with a men's chorus. And the reason I do that is, I say men, the term very loosely, but a bass chorus, because I tend to write for a group that's that way. But you can write however you want, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be writing a piece to express my grief over the loss of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. What I thought would be interesting in this composition, and let's pick a key. I thought maybe D minor would be a good key, or F major. I'm not sure. Generally speaking, when we write music, minor keys are, traditionally associated with being sad, unless you're J.S. Bach, in which case the saddest song ever written is in the key of is it G major? I guess it would be. This song here, which you've all heard, is...
I'm done spending an obscene amount of money.
Sorry. Well, I always forget that my YouTube account that I use is different from the one that I stream to, and so I need to cut that out. But anyway, this piece here, we've all heard it, is in a major key. It's in D major. Not a minor key, but a major key. I probably shouldn't play too much of it. I don't know if this particular performance is copyrighted. Even that chord right there is a major chord. The reason it sounds so sad, even though it's in a major key, is because Bach cleverly uses first inversion chords that, despite not being minor chords, have a lot of unstable space in them that makes it sound very sad. It's very beautiful. And the reason I bring that up is because this song needs to express a variety of emotions. It needs to express grief and sadness and anger. And in order to think about that, you got to think about what key should we be in. And so I'm fine doing D minor, but I might do a lot of stuff in its relative major, F major. So we'll get to that. I think time signature, these are all things you think about. Maybe you think about the words first a little bit. I mean, Renee's last words were, "I don't hate you," or "I'm not mad at you," I believe. And Alex Preddy's last words were, "Are you okay?" Saying that to the woman. So if you kind of think rhythmically, "I'm not mad at you" is like 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then if you think, "Are you okay?" it could be more of a 3, like a triplet meter. I don't know. I don't want to base the entire meter on one little phrase, but these are things you think about when you write music. Oh, I am so sorry. I've had the wrong screen up the whole time. Okay, here we go. Much better. Sorry about that. So again, we're going F major, and then we're doing, or D minor, really. So let's just for now keep it in 4, and let's maybe just slow it down a hair. So the way my music program works, I have a tempo thing here. Let's just knock it down to for some reason I always want it to be divisible by 3. So I'm gonna try 96 and see how that goes, and then I think I might just do some open chords in the piano to start. A couple ideas that I was having while I was thinking about this were, what if we played around with a major second? Now, I was thinking, what interval best expresses grief and loss with righteous anger behind it? And you could make an argument for like a minor second or a major seventh, or you can make a tritone or something, one of these extremely dissonant chords or intervals. But I thought actually the major second might be the more useful chord. It's one of my favorite intervals, and it's very adaptable. It can sound sad, it can sound tranquil, it can sound vibey, it can sound a lot of different ways. And so I thought we might play around with major seconds. And the other thing I thought we might play around with is a melodic 4-3 motif that we use a lot. So what I mean by that, for those who don't know, and when I say 4-3, I mean that in the major key, actually. So if we're in F, I'll just play the scale on the composition software here for you. And it goes like this. Okay, sorry, it's like computer-generated sounds, not the best. But in F major, the interval that I want to play around with melodically is this 4. So it's the that particular half step from B flat to A is, I would argue, one of the most emotional places in the diatonic major scale to express anguish. And I think there's ways we can use chords to make that happen, but that's kind of some of the ideas that I had. So let's go down and start. I think maybe like a nice open piano chord to start. Maybe half notes. And I think maybe usually you do start in the key, but I think I'm going to start kind of ambiguously with these open A's. What if we did something like this? This is kind of I kind of want there to be some sort of repeated chord structure. This particular chord, you could spell this chord a little bit more clearly for the music theorists watching. You could probably go, I mean, the way to understand this chord, honestly, is to go like this. And I guess is there a B in there? No. Okay, it's just this quartal harmony, E D. Yeah, it's just a stacked set of fourths. But, or you could say it's a suspended A with a add 9 chord, or actually, what is that? That would be add 11. So there's like a 4-3 suspension going on. It's something like that, but it's just a quartal harmony. And then this chord, I think I just kind of wanted to resolve to an A chord, which in D minor could be major, but I think I'm going to keep it minor, actually. Let's just try some kind of voice. We're going to keep this A. Let's do an A7, A minor 7 chord, and let's see how that sounds. So we've got this A there. What if we went... I'm not sure if I like the A being that high. Let me come back to that. Sorry, I need to get rid of this. And I know that voice sound is horrible, so I might change that just for the purpose of writing this piece. But let me just hear that. Yeah, that's fine. I kind of don't mind it being all more clustered. I think it'll be easier to play too. And then if we go down to an E, G, actually. So the E is moving up to G, the D is moving up to E, essentially. And that creates this, I don't like this voicing, though, now that I listen to it. I like the G a lot. I like the E. I guess maybe if I could find a way to get a C in there, it might be good. What if I take... So I'm kind of thinking voice leading wise. If I take this down to a C natural, which is the third of an A minor chord, I like that way better. Yeah, I like that way better. And then what if I went to like a D minor or something next measure here? So what if I go and so like this top na da na would be how that would go. No, no, no. And then we do a D. Sorry, I'm singing out loud. You kind of have to just run with me here. And then what would be a fun note to make for this D minor chord that we're essentially building here? And if the 7 would be that C holding over there, but then I think it'd be fun to maybe go down to F. And what if we made this a whole note? It's almost too similar to the previous chord, right? I don't like the C actually, even though normally I would. Let's make that just an A. Okay, that's not bad. Let me see how it sounds together. Actually, I really think this needs to be the root of this chord, which is D. Yeah, I think that's just going to be... Actually, and then I'm thinking now that I'm hearing it, I think we need to just keep the half notes going. I thought maybe it would rest a little bit, but we'll keep the half notes going. And then I think we're going to do some other kind of D minor chord. Actually, maybe we go A major at this point. With the third and the bass, maybe? Maybe with a add 9. I think add 9 would be good here. So what we do is we're going to... There's the 1. And then the 9 is going to be the B, which I guess has to be right down here. And then we could use, I guess, an E up here in the soprano part of that sort of chord progression. And then obviously we've got clashing. The problem is I'm doing an A chord with a D in it, and the D is not the what did I say the D was? The 9? It's not. The 9 in an A major chord obviously is a B. Oh, the B, yeah, that is a B. Okay, hold on. Yeah, it's just not meant to be, I don't think. I think actually this chord needs to not be major. I think that's the problem. I think that it's too conventional. I think if I stay with this minor sound, but then of course what we have is... Oh, I know what the problem is. It's a fucking B flat. That's the issue. This needs to be natural here, because I'm really not writing in the key that I'm, writing in. I'm writing in kind of an A sort of harmony system here. And so A would need that major second, that major 9 right there, not minor 9. And now what's the problem? We've got A, E, B. I mean, that should be A minor 9. It's just in first inversion, so maybe if I go down to that and change this to the E, keep the B right where it is, but maybe go ahead and put a C there. I like that way better. Okay, so that is one idea for this chord progression that can maybe kind of repeat. Actually, and then I'm really thinking this might be too strong now, this D here. So what if we just kept it A on that one? There's already a D in the upper part. I kind of like that better. The D kind of almost puts too much emphasis on that kind of passing chord. And I kind of like this idea that's happening here. Now, one thing you want to start thinking about is how do we express these harmonic ideas in ways that don't necessarily just have chords lining up directly like a church hymn. So one thing we could easily do, and by the way, I think I might need to extend this. I might need to double the values of these notes a little bit. We'll see, but for now I'm just going to keep them because we can always do that later if we decide that's what we want to do. Now, if we were to make this just one level more complicated here and place these chords in that order there, what we could do to make this slightly more interesting is we could rhythmically change this around. And the way that we could do that is we can take this E and A on this particular chord, and then we can do an upper voice, and we can place it in eighth notes, maybe even the D as well, we'll see. But so now we've got this bum 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 kind of thing going on, and let's just see how that sounds. And if we were to repeat that kind of thing, and I think I need to slow this down even further. Let's get this down to, I don't know, I always make them divisible by 3, so we'll do 72 and see how that goes. I'm dissatisfied with this third chord, but I like this chord quite a bit. And actually, now that I'm kind of hearing this, I think this second of these needs to go somewhere a little bit more. So this is fundamentally a minor 9 chord, I think. So we'll just alternate between the tonic and the third of that chord, A and C natural. And then over here, I'm going to try something similar. I'm going to take the G and the A out. And let's try, we'll delete that one so we leave space for the half notes to do something. But then, what was it, G and A, I think we said? Yeah, so if we just add all those just like that, but then let's do something similar here. We'll take the top of those 2 notes and we'll make it go somewhere. So this is, what do we decide? This is A, C, A with a G in it. So it's A, that is A minor 9. The first one was the quartal chord. This is the A minor 9 chord. So, okay, I see what's going on. So we do need to go up to the C on that one. On this one, we actually shouldn't go to the C. This one is the quartal chord, so it's like A, D, G. Do we have a G in that? No, it would. It's like E, D. Sorry, E, A, G. So sorry, E, A, D. Did I say G or D? Let's try that. And that's the kind of thing that we can start playing around with, these kind of rhythmic functions. And, what I'll end up doing is after I spend a little time working on this, I will start to take these ideas and place them around the different parts of the piece. But there are some good ideas there. Now, let's talk about the melody that I eventually want to employ a little bit. Let's just add a few measures just for free over here, and let's just kind of come up with like a melody. How about? And what I'm going to be thinking about when I write this melody is the feeling that somebody might have, maybe if they're living in Minnesota, maybe they knew one of these people, maybe they're frustrated with seeing children being abducted by ICE agents, maybe they want to share their love with their community. So I'm going to write this kind of melody here. Let's start with a pickup note. I feel like this is just screaming for a pickup note. Yeah, I might change the instrumentation here. I'm just going to change it. Sometimes when I'm working on pieces, I'll switch it over to electric keyboard just so I can hear it better. And now, of course, I've gotten rid of the 8 on that clef. That I can like customize that later. But the point is, we're just doing this for the purpose of writing it better. And actually, that's not going to work because I need a bass instrument now. So let's do... We'll just do a bassoon. Okay. And again, these are just temporary. But so I'm going to get... we're going to do this pickup note here. And it's going to be an 8th note. And I'm just going to fill in these rests. let me actually get this an octave. Yeah. Okay, so I set that octave to be a tenor, like you would see a tenor part in a choral piece. So I'm writing it a octave above where it sounds. Okay. And as I mentioned, the key interval that I'm really going to be working with is this B flat to A. So that one right there that I just wrote. Da, da, da. And maybe we rest a little bit. Da, da, da. Rest. Rest. Da. And if I just repeat that again, I think it would be good. And then da, 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 da. I think maybe something that goes down a little bit further this time. Maybe even a triplet. Which I can do easily there. Actually, I need to make that half. Let me just double that length. Hang on. I think I fucked it up. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so if I do the triplet there, okay. Okay, so let's try that. So I'm just going to play what I have so far. This is just me inventing a very, very simple, mostly stepwise melody based upon that interval that I believe expresses anguish the best. And then this is, I mean, it's almost writing itself at this point, but we clearly need to do another pickup B flat here. And I hate to use so many fucking triplets, but I think I'm going to do so again here. And then I think we do something a little bit different at this point. I think we just kind of go under it a little bit, similar rhythm, but we're a little bit under it. And I'm actually just going to go to the formatting and make these notes just slightly smaller. And try to get more stuff on the same page here, basically. But okay, so we've got da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Yeah, and then it switches to this. We're almost going to G minor here. Yeah, I think it probably will be a G minor harmony. Let's stop there for a sec. Well, let me just finish this one last bit of this melody so that we have something to work with. And we're gonna repeat this kind of. Oops. We're going to repeat this kind of thing here. Oh shit, I gotta get going. Well, anyway, I do have to get going. I think what I'll do though is I think I'll stream more of this music project. It's fun and I enjoy talking about it while I'm doing it. It makes me think about it better.